At exactly 9:47 a.m. on a bright Wednesday morning, the fire alarm blared through all 38 floors of Delco Thera's downtown headquarters. It was a shrill, pulsing tone that cut through conference calls and coffee breaks with clinical urgency. Executives in glass offices paused. Junior analysts grabbed their phones. Department leads exchanged looks, confused but compliant, as the building began to evacuate floor by floor. Fire drill protocols snapped into motion. Orderly lines, exit signs glowing, soft-soled shoes shuffling onto stairwells. Outside, on the crowded plaza, hundreds of employees gathered in tight clusters under a cloudless sky. They checked their watches, whispered about false alarms, joked about delays. Nothing burned, nothing smoked. But precisely 23 minutes later, while department heads were still accounting for staff and team leaders refreshed internal status alerts, an encrypted email pinged the inboxes of 3 investigative journalists and 1 federal compliance officer. The subject line read, "Priority, Drug T, 721 Unreported Adverse Events." Attached was a single document, an 11-page internal risk report stamped confidential. Eyes only. It detailed 3 known but unpublicized deaths linked to T-721, Delco Thera's flagship immunosuppressant. The document included chart summaries, anonymized patient notes, and a toxicology review signed off by a former head of research who had since resigned. The file had been locked beneath 6 layers of privileged access storage. No employee without senior clearance should have ever seen it. But someone had, and now someone had shared it. The medication in question, one of the most widely prescribed therapies of its kind in the country. A blockbuster drug generating over $2.3 billion in quarterly revenue. Its TV spots ran during Sunday football. Its logo was printed on pins, tote bags, and waiting room brochures. And now, a shadow had fallen across it. Inside the building, while alarms echoed and evacuation procedures distracted the internal security team, someone had triggered the release. And just like that, the countdown had begun. Not to fix the truth, but to bury it for good. Ava Marin didn't believe in coincidence. Not anymore. Once, maybe, she'd clung to the idea that mistakes were accidental and delays unintentional. But 15 years inside the pharmaceutical industry, 6 of them at Delco Thera, had burned that naivete out of her like a fever. She believed in patterns now, in silences that spoke louder than words, in memos edited 1 word at a time until they said nothing at all. She believed in how reports were softened, how adverse event data was contextualized, how risks were weighted against market expansion goals. She didn't hate her job. She hated the parts of it she couldn't tell anyone about. As a senior compliance analyst, Ava had access to things most staff didn't even know existed: secondary data audits, internal email flags, legal pre-clearance drafts. Her job was part ethics officer, part damage control. But increasingly, it felt like neither. It felt like she was patching holes in a ship built to sink everything inconvenient. She hadn't always been this jaded. Once, she believed she could make things better, that she could use her knowledge of the system to steer it away from danger. Her first year at Delco Thera, she filed a formal objection to a dosing schedule error that had caused a cluster of minor complications in a trial. The response? Her access was temporarily suspended, and she was reassigned to a non-essential compliance queue for 6 months. Lesson learned. So now she played the game. She filed the summaries. She flagged what she could. She kept her head down. Until the file. It didn't arrive by email. It appeared on her secure local drive, placed in a folder she hadn't opened in 2 years. Archive. Our projects. The document had no metadata trail. No user signature. Just the file name. T721_adverse findings_amend_org.pdf. She opened it during a late-night review session, eyes bleary, coffee cold. And the moment she read the first page, her stomach turned to ice. The document wasn't a draft. It was a finalized report, signed, time-stamped, formatted for internal legal use. It outlined 3 patient deaths directly linked to long-term use of T721. The patients had exhibited early markers: rash, elevated enzymes, mood instability before cardiac failure. The deaths were listed as non-attributable in public documentation. But the report's language was clear. A probable causative link between T721 and fatal arrhythmia has been established in these cases. And the kicker? The report was dated 8 months ago. She stared at it for over an hour. Not because she didn't understand, but because she did. The document had been buried, and someone who still had access had resurrected it for her eyes. She didn't know why, but she knew what it meant. She now had a choice. Delete it. Forget she ever saw it. Report it quietly to her director and watch it vanish again. Or act. And in that moment, eyes dry, heart racing, she made her decision. She would not let it vanish. She wouldn't run, but she wouldn't play by their rules either. Ava didn't act immediately. She couldn't. To move too fast was to trigger suspicion. Surveillance was constant, even if you didn't see it, especially in compliance. At Delco Thera, digital footprints were sacred currency. Every download pinged a tracker. Every file access was time-stamped, cross-referenced, and logged against user profiles. There were no second chances, just reviews. So Ava waited. She observed, and then she planned. Her first step was to isolate the document. She didn't store it on her work drive or forward it via company email. That would have been reckless. Instead, she saved it onto an encrypted thumb drive she kept inside a hollowed-out dry erase marker at her desk. A decoy she'd used only once before, years ago, to smuggle out a redacted audit document during a regulatory dispute. She left it untouched for a day. 2. On the third night, after a late compliance meeting ended under dim conference room lights and stale coffee, she stayed behind. She waited until the floor thinned, the lights dimmed, and the IT shift turned over. Then she made her move. Deep in Sublevel 3, a floor now mostly used for archives and janitorial inventory, there was an abandoned terminal in a cramped storage room. Once used for facilities management, it was still wired into the secure print server, but hadn't been updated in years. Ava had discovered it during a filing audit and made a mental note. Now it became her lifeline. She booted the terminal. It buzzed awake with a lagging fan and a green-lit login screen. She inserted the thumb drive. The file opened. She printed all 11 pages on a non-watermarked paper. When the printer jammed on page 5, her heart nearly stopped. But it resumed. When it was done, she layered the report between old strategy memos and printed newsletters from Delco Thera's employee outreach team. She folded the bundle into a plain manila folder and clipped it shut. As she walked out, her shoes silent on the scuffed tile, she passed no one. Her security badge didn't trigger any alerts. At home, Ava worked quickly. She kept a private laptop, air-gapped, never connected to the internet, stored in a fireproof safe behind her bedroom dresser. She scanned each page, double-checked clarity, then encrypted the files using a passphrase she had never written down. Then came the backups. One copy went to a remote cloud server routed through VPNs across 4 countries, masked behind the facade of a fake nonprofit website she'd built during her graduate years. The second copy she burned to a physical disk and hid inside a hollowed-out book, a faux copy of a business ethics manual that she kept on her nightstand. Still, despite the precautions, Ava couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching. Not directly, not surveillance cameras or red-handed alerts. But in the days that followed, she noticed things. Her name vanished from a shared document for a high-priority audit she had led for 3 months. Her VPN access to the historical compliance database was temporarily disabled due to redundancy. When she entered meetings, conversations quieted a little too quickly. And when she passed certain legal staff in the hall, she saw something in their eyes she hadn't seen before. Recognition. Calculation. It was subtle. Surgical. Delco Thera had noticed something, but they didn't know everything. Not yet. Ava started leaving her phone in her desk drawer during meetings. She took long walks without her ID badge. She rerouted her commute, taking different exits, changing trains, sometimes looping the block before entering her building. Each night, she cataloged the day, what she accessed, who she spoke to, any potential digital footprint she left behind. She did it not out of paranoia, but survival. She'd worked too long in systems designed to detect irregularity. Now she had become one. Ava didn't need confirmation that her time at Delco Thera was running out. The signs were subtle at first, carefully staged, strategically placed, just enough to feel like coincidence, yet calibrated to dismantle her sense of stability piece by piece. It began with her calendar. One morning, she realized she'd never received the recurring invite for the quarterly compliance review, a meeting she'd led for the past 6 quarters. At first, she thought it was an error. Then she learned the meeting had taken place without her. A junior associate she had mentored was listed in the notes as acting lead. The next week, a budget oversight meeting she was expected to attend was relocated to a private boardroom, and no one thought to notify her. When she arrived at the original location, the room was dark. No apology followed, just a vague reply. "Oh, we thought you were briefed." Then came the smaller violations. Her badge no longer opened the secure supply cabinet she accessed weekly. Her company parking space was reassigned, and her workstation, her customized, encrypted terminal, underwent routine IT maintenance without prior notice. When she returned, her browser history was wiped. Her bookmarks, compliance dashboards, archived reports were gone. Delco Thera wasn't outright terminating her. They were ghosting her out of the system, but not too quickly, because they weren't sure yet what she knew or what she'd done with it. That uncertainty gave her one final advantage. So Ava moved carefully. She used the time. She kept her routine boring, her movements predictable. She responded to emails promptly, asked no follow-up questions, and made polite conversation in the break room, all while constructing a fortress beneath the surface. She started building a package, not to publish, not yet, but to protect herself. She gathered documentation, exported redacted logs, screen captures, time-stamped record from known vulnerabilities in the version control system. She copied reports during lunch breaks, scanned pages late at night, took photos of internal memos using a smartwatch disguised as a fitness tracker. She even sourced a copy of the original email trail that mentioned the buried T721 side effect analysis, hidden inside a forward chain from a now-defunct research division. For storage, she used a vintage Mac Mini she'd bought secondhand from an old repair shop. The system was isolated, no Wi-Fi, no Bluetooth, no network card. It connected to nothing. She powered it through a manual kill switch and accessed only while her phones were inside a Faraday pouch. Every upload was physical, thumb drives with no serial IDs, wiped to factory settings before and after use. She created 3 versions of her package. One formatted for media distribution, anonymized, encrypted, easily uploaded to a public whistleblower site in under 60 seconds. One designed for legal counsel, structured for admissibility and containing verified chain of custody records. And one as a failsafe, encrypted with a one-time key, split into fragments, and distributed across cloud services under alias accounts she'd created a decade ago. Then came the hardest decision of all: who to trust. She made a list, names that spanned her career. Former mentors, investigative watchdogs, data analysts with clean reputations. One was a human rights officer she'd met at a pharmaceutical ethics conference. Another was a journalist she'd had coffee with once, 7 years ago, but never forgot. Each name came with a weight of loyalty, of risk, of unknowns. She eliminated the obvious weak points first. Anyone still inside Delco Thera. Anyone with family tied to lobbying groups. Anyone she couldn't verify through at least 2 unrelated sources. Her final list had 2 names. One was based in Berlin, an investigative reporter who worked through encrypted channels and had exposed a medical data laundering scheme 2 years prior. The other? A reclusive data compliance auditor known only by alias, who ran an underground review board for whistleblower files and had helped leak internal algorithms from a credit scoring company that year. 2 strangers, one inside the system, one outside. She didn't know if they would respond, but she was out of time to find someone safer. Ava sent the packages at 2:12 a.m. on a Sunday. The apartment was silent, save for the low hum of her air-gapped Mac Mini and the soft creak of old pipes hidden behind the walls. She hadn't slept properly in days. Her hands were dry, her eyes red from hours of staring at screens and encrypted command lines, but she couldn't afford a mistake. Not at this stage. She had spent the entire weekend in isolation, working methodically through every detail. She hash-verified the integrity of every document, ensuring not a single byte had been altered since she created it. She checked each image, chart, and page for hidden metadata, timestamps, usernames, revision logs that could lead back to her. She flattened the PDFs, stripped their edit trails, converted them to raw image scans, then recompiled them with hash signatures. She even scanned the final files again with a secondary system, just to be sure. She ran her VPN stack twice, triple-checked the exit nodes, scrubbed the DNS history on her burner modem, reset the BIOS clock on her machine. When it was time to send, she paused, took one long breath, and clicked send without hesitation. The first message went to Berlin. It passed through 6 onion-layered relays across 5 countries, each node timed with randomized delay intervals. The recipient address belonged to the investigative journalist she'd researched for months, someone known for exposing corporate cover-ups without compromising sources. Attached, the media package, anonymized, signed with a one-time use signature key, encrypted with a 256-bit passphrase stored only in a physical envelope locked inside her freezer. The second upload was even more obscure. It moved through a private gateway, designed not to receive confirmation, not to allow downloads, not to permit future access. A dead-drop vault. It would alert only once. The auditor would know how to retrieve it. Then she closed the laptop, sealed the Mac Mini in its Faraday case, and placed it back into the false bottom of her closet. She unplugged her router, powered off her phone, and sat alone in the dark. She waited. For 6 days, there was nothing. No reply, no ping, no bounce back, no thank you, just silence. At Delco Thera, the atmosphere was tightening like a noose. The smiles grew thinner, conversations more clipped. The tension in her department was palpable, like everyone knew something was shifting but couldn't name what. On the second day, her email permissions changed again. Her inbox now showed only intradepartmental messages. She couldn't search anything company-wide. On the third, her name vanished from the internal compliance dashboard. Her profile redirected to a generic group folder. By day 4, her ID badge was downgraded. Sublevel 3, where she'd printed the original documents, now beeped red when she scanned. There was no formal demotion, no termination paperwork, just vanishing access, shrinking walls, a silent erasure. She began preparing for the final phase. Not escape, not retaliation, witnessing. She started drafting a formal log of everything: dates, times, edits, observations. She used analog formats, legal pads, color-coded markers, hand-drawn timelines. She photocopied each page and mailed it to a P.O. box she had opened under a false name months earlier. She stopped sleeping at home every night. She rotated between friends' couches and short-term rentals booked under burner accounts. She changed her commute. She started checking reflections in glass and license plates in rearview mirrors. She wore noise-canceling headphones in public, but kept them off. And still, she waited. Because once the silence breaks, it doesn't go back. It broke on a Thursday morning. She was standing in line at a quiet corner cafe just off Oak Ridge and 7th. Her hood drawn up, her hands wrapped tightly around a disposable cup she hadn't dared to drink from yet. It had been weeks since she'd tasted a proper coffee. Her nerves were too raw, her sleep too fragmented. But something about that morning felt different. Tense, expectant. Then her burner phone buzzed. Just once. A single, terse notification lit up the black and white screen. Received. Verification in progress. Her pulse didn't spike. Her breath didn't catch. Instead, everything slowed. The background chatter of baristas, the clatter of mugs, even the hiss of steam from the espresso machine faded to static. She looked up, scanned the room. No eyes followed her. No unusual presence lingered. But in her chest, She felt it, that subtle, unmistakable shift. The silence was cracking. 2 hours later, the first article dropped. Not front page. Not scandalous. Not yet. It appeared as a post on a respected, if understated, investigative blog. No breaking headlines. Just a quiet expose citing multiple internal sources and preliminary leaked documentation. It outlined how Delco Thera had allegedly withheld safety data linked to its best-selling immunosuppressant, T721. No names were published. No direct documents shown. But enough detail had slipped through. References to an internal memo, a buried risk profile, and a toxicology summary signed but unreleased. The reaction was immediate. By the end of the day, the article had been shared over 40,000 times. Discussions erupted in closed forums. Anonymous physicians began chiming in, citing strange side effects and unexpected complications in patients on long-term T721 regimens. Hashtags surfaced. Whistleblower accounts speculated. Subreddits lit up with conspiracy theories. And Ava watched from a dimly lit co-working space underground, 3 floors below the city's noise, seated at a terminal she hadn't touched in nearly 3 years. She had prepaid for a full week, under a name not hers, and now she sat motionless, hood still on, watching the world take its first breath of the truth. Then she logged in. Phase 2 began. The first release was only a seed. The real proof, the audit logs, boardroom emails, compliance alterations, was all still intact, segmented, and ready. Ava had organized it into a cascade release. If one node was taken down, 2 more would follow. And now, the world was watching. Delco Thera responded, just as expected. A 2-paragraph statement was posted on their investor portal by noon. We are aware of unverified online reports regarding past internal documents. We take all safety concerns seriously and are initiating an internal review. It was sterile, composed, lawyered, but their stock price dropped by 2.7% in the first 6 hours. By the next morning, an open letter appeared from a patient advocacy group. Then came the calls from late-night pundits, the appearance of a redacted memo on a German science forum, and a leaked screenshot of a Slack conversation between 2 Delco Thera team leads worrying about containment optics. It was all beginning to unravel. And Ava? She didn't celebrate. She didn't even smile. She opened her vault. Inside were files she had not yet shared. A signed-off marketing override that fast-tracked T721 into ad campaigns despite unresolved review flags. A slide deck used during a quarterly pitch to investors boasting minimum liability exposure. A private message between 2 board members. If it leaks, we shift focus to pediatric trials. Public won't touch it then. She stared at them. Then she encrypted them again. Phase 3 could wait. She stepped outside, pulled her scarf up, and walked 6 blocks to a different building. Rented another private room. Sat down. Ordered nothing. Just opened a notepad and wrote down 3 words. They moved first, because Delco Thera wasn't the only entity hiding something. The silence she'd cracked was just one layer. The system was bigger, deeper, and now she had more work to do. Ava Marin's story is a haunting reminder that truth rarely announces itself. It waits in footnotes, in overwritten documents, in quiet corrections buried deep in metadata. It doesn't knock loudly. It waits for someone brave enough to stop pretending it isn't there. In a world run by numbers and quarterly targets, silence is currency. But whistleblowers pay in something harder to measure: reputation, safety, sleep. What's the cost of speaking up? For Ava, it was everything, and not enough. Because the silence never leaves on its own. It has to be broken. If you were Ava, would you risk everything to expose a truth no one wants to hear? Tell us in the comments. Like, share, and subscribe if this story stayed with you. And if you've ever held on to something too dangerous to speak, know that you're not alone. Next week on Shadows of Power, a political campaign's stolen files expose a covert alliance with a foreign data mining firm and a quiet war over voter psychology.